if we're going to fix the problem the governor was talking about, we really need the involvement and leadership of corporate America. And I'd like to call the next panel onto the stage. We have representatives from 3 of the most important companies in America who are going to address us, 3 very different companies. The first one is Tracy Bame, president of the Freeport-McMoRan Foundation. Freeport is really a southwestern company. Its roots are in mining. The mining industry is really what built the Southwest in many ways. And Tracy is going to talk about how Freeport is working in the rural Southwest and also with Native Americans to improve pathways to success. Then we have Gayatri Agnew, who's Director of Career Opportunity at the Walmart Foundation. Walmart is the largest private employer in the United States. And I think a lot of people don't realize that Walmart serves really the bottom half of the American population. Those are the people we're talking about. How can we provide better pathways to the Southwest? The reason we invited her here is the Walmart Foundation recently announced a major new effort to dramatically improve pathways to success for low-income retail workers. And this is a major statement by Walmart. It's really a welcome development. We're going to hear about what Walmart hopes to do. And finally, we have Jaime Casap from Google. His title is the Global Education Evangelist, which is quite a title for anybody's job. Jaime is an example of what we're talking about here. He was born into poverty and Hell's Kitchen. English was not his first language. Look at where he is today. He told me that last year, Google had 2.5 million job applicants. If there's one company that millennials want to work for, it's probably Google. What he's going to tell us today is we need to rethink our approach to education. Moderating this outstanding panel is Dean Jonathan Koppell of the College of Public Service here at ASU, and they are on the cutting edge of addressing this issue. The College of Public Service is where the social work programs are housed. It's also home of the Morrison Institute for Public Policy, which was a partner in this institute. So I'll turn it over to Jonathan and look forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Bill. I guess we've all got the mics on. There we go. Great. So, good morning. It's absolutely a great pleasure to be with you, and we have an outstanding panel to address this issue and get us started. And Bill took the job of introducing our panelists, so I'll get ahead of that. I'll jump ahead of that. The thing that is interesting to me, and reflecting on the meaning of this conference and some of the governor's words, is that it seems like this problem of figuring out pathways for the full range of young people in this country, like so many problems we confront today, is solvable. And we will talk about some of the solutions being promoted by the 3 companies represented by the individuals on this stage. But indeed, so many of you in the audience are working on solutions to this challenge. What we lack, and as I say, I think this is a broader issue than just this concern. What we lack, I think, in this country, and arguably beyond that, is the strength, the self-critical perspective to reject the status quo as being unacceptable. That I think is something that we as a society have to confront, which is why mediocre outcomes, suboptimal situations have been accepted as just the way it is. Oh, so 25% of the young people will never have regular employment. Oh, well, we have a shockingly high percentage of our young people who are incarcerated. Oh, you can't really live on a job that pays minimum wage and have a decent standard of living. This is part of the world we live in. And I could go on and on and on. Each of those, there's complex problems. There's a lot to it. I'm not pretending that you could just snap your fingers and fix them. But you have to believe that the status quo is not just a situation, that it's a problem that has to be addressed and that we are capable of addressing. And I think that this is exciting to have a group of people who are committed to this, rejecting the status quo. But as we'll talk about in this discussion, I think the key for us to be effective is to figure out how to enlarge the group of people to get outside of this room and say, how come you, business community, government community, education community, how come you accept the status quo as being okay? And I think that's part of our mission. Now, It's exciting for ASU to host this because I think ASU, in some sense, is taking that challenge in the educational realm, which is only one pathway, but it says, we reject the idea that a university can't be excellent and inclusive together. And I won't go on this because you'll hear from President Crow tomorrow, who will speak far more eloquently to that aspiration than I ever can, but it starts with the rejection of an idea that the status quo is the only outcome possible. And so that's, I think, the challenge for our group to talk about today, and for this conference to address over the next 2 days. And there is an outstanding collection of people, and hopefully this conversation will set that up to some extent. What I asked the panelists to do in an email late last night was to kick us off. This is a very intelligent, lively group. They don't need a lot of preparation. Was to kick us off with a brief introduction, talking a bit about what each of their companies are doing with respect to cultivating pathways, both for employees of the firms that they work for, but for others as well, because in each case they are not only interested in developing those pathways, but in some ways, more importantly, why? Why do you view this as an important thing? Why has your company viewed this as something to take on and view as critical to the mission? And I was thinking, as Doug was telling his personal story, and Bill stole this a little bit, but he probably had the same thought I had, maybe a little bit of your own personal pathway. Because I think if this is about pathways, it's an interesting story to say, how did you end up where you ended up, and how do we encourage the folks out there in the world to have pathways that are similarly rich? So Tracy, I will let you sat next to me. It's your fault. I will let you kick things off with a 5-minute or so opening remark.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really excited about all of the sessions over the next 2 days. And it's a critical time to be having this conversation. We haven't figured out really how to connect education with the workplace in effective ways over the last couple of decades. And each year, the problem seems to escalate. So I'm pleased to be here and to give you a bit of a perspective about who Freeport-McMoRan is, what the challenge is for us, and why we feel it is absolutely 200% critical that we address this pathways issue. So I have to give you a little bit of background about who we are as a company in order to talk about why it's so important for us and how we're starting to think about the pathways a bit differently than we have in the past. So Bill gave a nice introduction. I oversee our foundation, but I also have occasions to spend a lot of time out in our operations hearing from our operational leadership about what their challenges and issues are. And the one thing that they consistently tell us keeps them up at night is the issue of filling jobs. So as you might know, Freeport-McMoRan is a premier international natural resources company. We're headquartered here in Phoenix, and we have operations all over the Southwest. We're the world's largest publicly traded producer of copper, the world's largest producer of molybdenum, which is another mineral. It's added to steel to strengthen it. We're a significant gold, oil, and natural gas producer. We have active mining operations in 5 countries, including the US, Chile, Peru, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Indonesia. And we have a processing facility in Spain. In the US, we have 5 active operations here in the state of Arizona, 2 in Colorado, 2 in New Mexico, and a processing facility in Texas. We also have oil and gas production facilities in the Gulf of Mexico, California, Louisiana, and Wyoming. And we have a strong commitment to environmental and safety performance, as well as a commitment to the local communities where we operate. And just to give you a perspective, if you're not familiar with the fact that the mining still exists in the country and what we use these minerals for, they're used in pretty much everything that you use on a daily basis. And we have a saying in the mining industry, if it can't be grown, it has to be mined. And that's basically true. If it doesn't come out of the ground, isn't grown naturally, it has to be mined. And I always like to give people a few facts about how much you'll use in a lifetime. Every American born will need 985 pounds of copper throughout their lifetime, 72,000 gallons of petroleum or oil and gas, and about 56,000 pounds of other minerals and metals. And hopefully you don't have an outdated idea of what mining is and what the industry is all about. We are a high-tech industry now. I know that's hard to believe, but everything is driven by technology. We use technology to continuously come up with more environmentally sound ways to mine our product, to process that product, and to protect the environment. So everything we do, including our haul trucks that drive copper ore from one place to another throughout the mine, are driven by technology. And technology is used also to protect the safety of our employees. So pretty much every aspect of our business is high-tech and requires some type of STEM skill. So I want to give you a little bit of a perspective on our global workforce. It includes approximately 36,000 employees globally, much smaller than my two fellow panelists here, but for us significant. Our workforce is 90% male, 10% female. We have 80% of the jobs in our workforce that require basic STEM literacy, just basic. And 30% of our jobs require advanced STEM knowledge. So for us, the pathways all revolve around STEM education in particular. Nearly all jobs, not just that 80%, so 100%, require some type of education past high school. We employ a significant number of professional degrees, such as engineering and geologists, and a significant number of trade and technical workers, electricians, mechanics, field technicians, welders, machinists, those types of positions. And this is a statistic that will probably surprise many of you. The number of job openings that we have in the US at any given time, and this is about probably between 15 and 18,000 employees, are housed in our southwestern operations, which is where most of our US employees are located. So on any given day, the number of job openings we have is 500 to 1,000. Jobs are going unfilled. We cannot find people to fill those jobs. So that's why this issue keeps our operational leadership up at night. They can't hire people to run our operations. And with the looming retirement of the baby boomer generation, it is starting to paint an even more drastic picture. So let me just quickly run through just some average salaries for our jobs, and then I'll end there. And I think this surprises a lot of people as well. So you might expect that starting engineers, their technical positions, they are starting at fairly high salaries. So chemical engineers, environmental engineers, geoscientists, metallurgical engineers, mining engineers start roughly at, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says roughly $45,000 to $50,000. We say $60,000 to $70,000, starting positions. There was an article that was in the New York Times in late 2012 that reported that graduates of South Dakota School of Mines were earning higher wages right out of college than Harvard graduates. So those mining degrees were worth their weight in gold, so to speak. For our trade and technical positions, and this is where I couldn't agree more with the comments of Doug Pruitt and the governor around, we have to change the perception of trade and technical positions. We have electricians starting out at $45,000 to $50,000 a year. Electricians, we cannot find. Welders, mechanics, similar starting salaries. The average starting salary from what I've read in this state, and I'm guessing might be in the same range for the other states joining us, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, Utah, is $18,000 for the average job. We have electricians and other trade and technical positions starting at $50,000 to $60,000. They're lucrative positions, there's room for careers, we just need to figure out the pathways to get there.
Gayatri, why don't you give us the intro? It takes a second.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? My name is Gayatri Agnew, and as was said, I work for the Walmart Foundation. And I'll just start by giving you guys a little bit of context about the company, and then go into a bit of the work of the Walmart Foundation and our focus on the retail sector, specifically in America. So first of all, I have a couple questions for you guys. How many of you know of a Walmart somewhere near your home? Just put your hand up. Okay. How many of you have been in a Walmart? Okay, yeah, that works. That's pretty much the situation. So as was mentioned in the intro, I think it's important just for context to know that Walmart is the world's largest private employer. And we have in the United States 5,000 stores. And each of you that raised your hand when I said, is there a Walmart near you that you drive by? I want to share something with you that I think might shift a little bit of your perspective next time you drive by that single store. Every Walmart store represents, and we think of as an slightly independent business in that community. That store has $80 million on average in revenue, and employs 300 to 400 people. So as you think about your community, you think about the employers that are in your community, you think about the jobs that are accessible, particularly to young people in your community, often Walmart doesn't make that list. It's sort of like, oh, and then there's a Walmart store over there. But $80 million, 400 people, I don't think anyone would sort of balk at having an employer of that size come into your community. And the reality is, given the footprint of our company, we are already in most of your communities. So I think it's just an important point of context. The second thing I want to share around our work at Walmart, and hopefully you guys have heard some of these things announced over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, is that in February, the company rolled out a very significant commitment to our workforce. What made the headlines is the shift that we made in wage. So starting wages at Walmart have now moved as of April 1st to $9 an hour. So nobody in this country working at Walmart makes less than $9 an hour. The vast majority of folks in any position beyond entry level make more than that. And starting in February of next year, those that successfully complete the entry-level employee training, aptly called Pathways, will actually move to $10 an hour. And so what's above sort of the surface on that is wage. What's below the surface on that, which didn't get as much press coverage, is what happened in our stores, what is happening in our stores around a really fundamental shift toward valuing skills and training and investing in our workers. So we are rolling out a national initiative called Pathways Training Program. And what Pathways is a 9-month training program that every single one of our associates will go through starting in February. Right now it's piloting in several dozen stores, but it'll roll chain-wide in February of next year. And Pathways teaches all of our associates, it's been referred to as a crash course in retail, but it teaches all of our associates both what their role is in the retail chain and how what they do matters. And I want to pause on that for a second. We've had a lot of folks, particularly folks like those of you in this room that work on training and economic development, who have asked us if we could share our curriculum for Pathways, which, by the way, we do intend to do in the long term. But the secret sauce of the Pathways program is not the curriculum, it's the work experience. And so the way that Pathways is taught is you do a module and then you work because you're already at work. You're already working in a Walmart store. And your supervisor observes your work and your supervisor gives you feedback and you improve. And the why piece is also tremendously significant, and I think something that we often skip over when we think about training. The challenge that we face with our workforce is not that our cashiers don't know how. It's not a mechanical how question, it's a why question. Why does this matter? Why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to my family? Why does this matter to the customers that I'm serving? And so by really going deep into the why this matters and how the movements of every associate in our store affect one another, we're aiming and working to build a stronger team amongst associates and help them connect in a deeper way to their customers and to the community. And so the Pathways program, I think, represents a really significant shift for our company toward focusing more on our associates and focusing more on making Walmart a place where associates can come to start careers. I think in sharp contrast to the comments that were shared about the mining industry, I would think it would be a tremendous success if a Walmart associate that was working with us was also pursuing a degree part-time and went on to work at your company. That is success to Walmart. And so I think we acknowledge that many folks will start in our company and move up in retail, and that's fantastic, but that's not the reality for many of our associates. What we want, though, is that the job and the time that they spend at Walmart to be meaningful in their career trajectory and their career pathway. There are many prominent folks who got their start in retail. When Bill and I had our phone call and prep for today's panel, he shared with me that his first job was in retail, and I'm sure many of you in the audience as well. And so the question is, how can you use what you learn in the company to go where it is you want to go, and to really understand the skills that you learn as a result of the job with that company? So right now, we see a lot of our associates stay for 6 to 9 months, and when they leave, they often leave to go to a very similar job. That's not working for them, and it's not working for us. What we want to see is our associates staying 12 to 18 months at minimum, our entry-level associates, which gives tremendous positive contribution to our company and to our bottom line. And should they want to stay and move on and move up, that's fantastic. But if they go, we don't want them to leave and enter into another entry-level job at the same wage. We want to see them able to rise. And so now shifting sort of from the company perspective to the foundation perspective, when the company announced all of the transformational work that we're doing on wage in the retail sector and on training, the foundation announced an initiative to invest $100 million over the next 5 years in creating stronger pathways for economic mobility in retail. And this initiative ultimately will result in us identifying 8 to 10 specific geographic communities in the U.S., and would love for one of those to be in the Southwest, where we can really build the ecosystem with employer partners that you need for folks, whether their entry-level job is at Walmart or Starbucks or Home Depot, that is the entry-level job that allows them to move on and up, whether that's from retail to hospitality to potentially to mining, wherever it might be. We often talk about retail and adjacent sector jobs, by which we're referring primarily to customer service jobs, hospitality, restaurant services, and retail. And I think as we think about the dialogue on career pathways and on economic opportunity, those are the sectors that are often left out. We hear a ton, and don't get me wrong, the growth in IT and healthcare is fantastic, but there's not enough jobs. So let's just be very real for a moment, and I think I would encourage all of you, as you're looking at identifying pathway programs, wherever that pathway program results in a specific job, ask, what is that job? Not what is that type of job, but what is the job title? What do you need to know? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities you need to do that job? How much will you make doing that job? Because a lot of times we get into this, we want to put folks into this sector or that sector because it's attractive. Well, how many healthcare jobs are in your community? How many IT jobs are in your community? How many retail jobs are in your community? So it's a sector that really can't get left out, and is a really critical part of the pathway systems that we all build together. And the last thing I would just add is, we talk a lot about a skills gap. Skills gap is absolutely a reality, but I think for a company like Walmart, we hire over 700,000 people in the US every year, and we get slightly over 2 million applicants. So we don't have a skills gap because we don't have any requirements for entry. We don't require a high school diploma. We are a ban-the-box company, if you know what that refers to, so we're not discriminating against criminal background. We're a very, very open and accessible company. So the issue for us is not the initial hiring, it's the mobility. And so Walmart, I think, and many other service sector companies are really facing a mobility gap. So back to Bill's opening comments about how we sort of preserve and restore the American dream, we cannot do it without being inclusive of the service sector jobs. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think one point that I hope we can come back to is the issue of the pathway doesn't end at the hiring moment, which I think metaphorically it seems like that's often the way it's constructed. The pathway has to continue through employment, and what's the progression, and how do you grow in a job and move on to another job. It seems like that's a critical part of the discussion that has to be central to the conversation. So Jaime, you always have the coolest title on any panel.
Yeah.
We all want to be chief education evangelists.
So
tell us what that means in this context.
So first of all, I want to thank you for the email that you sent at 11 o'clock last night. I didn't read it till this morning. You know what I have an 8-month-old.
I know who I'm dealing with right
I have an
now.
8-month-old at home. Do you know what I'm doing at 11 o'clock? I'm either sleeping or trying to find alcohol that I can give the 8-month-old to fall asleep. So I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned pathways. So let's start with pathways. I started as in Hell's Kitchen, New York, not the Hell's Kitchen that you find today, with all the nice restaurants and bars.
They don't even call it, they call it Clinton.
Clinton?
Yeah.
The old one, the one where on the brochure when you were visiting New York, it said, do not go into these neighborhoods, and Hell's Kitchen was on that list. Grew up with a single mom on welfare and food stamps, went to PS 111, and they said, welcome to PS 111, and I said, ¿qué? And so English is my second language. So so for me, I wanted to get out of that community. It wasn't the nicest place to grow up. And there were two paths that I saw. One was either to play in the NBA or... Has anyone here seen me play basketball? I might be good. Or two, to get my education. So I did that, and despite all the odds, put on my reality distortion glasses and graduated high school, graduated college, got my master's at Arizona State University, and I'm here today. But more importantly, what we have to think about when we think about pathways, I want to look at it from the other angle, which is the pathways that we're creating for our students aren't just for those students, right? They're for generations to come, right? There's a greater likelihood that what we can do with education is disrupt poverty. And so now I have 3 kids. I mentioned the 8-month-old, but I also have a 22-year-old and a 13-year-old. And my 22-year-old just graduated from college, and we never talked about going to college. I never had to bring it up. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college. She assumed she was going to graduate school because I went to graduate school, but she also assumed that I was paying for that. So we had to cut that off. And so that's the power that we have with education. And when we talk about pathways, is this idea that we can stop poverty in its tracks in a generational sense, right? We can create families that poverty all of a sudden stops, because the perspective of my 22-year-old and my 13-year-old are completely and fundamentally different than they were for me, right? And I have these, my own entertainment moments, like when my daughter is sitting there as she's doing in Atlanta, as she's doing her internship at CNN, talking to me about what she wants to do after she graduates and whether she wants to go and spend the summer in Europe, and I'm taking pictures of her going, like I grew up thinking the other side of the George Washington Bridge was the West Coast, and here she is thinking about Europe, right? So these are entertaining moments for me, but that's the power that we have with education. Now, when we talk about education, I want to make sure that we try to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. And the first one for me is that I don't like to say that education is broken, right? I don't like to say that it needs to be fixed. And the reason why, just to hear me out, is because, yes, graduation rates aren't where they should be, but in 1910, graduation rates were 6%, right? The content that we're teaching students today is 10x, 100x better than it was 150 years ago when we started education. We invented college, right? The United States becoming the economic and military superpower that we are based on on the foundation of the education that we've been able to create in this country. So it's not that education is broken. What I want to do is do what we did 150 years ago, and all of us in this room can do this, is say, okay, just like we did 150 years ago, what is the right education system that we need for the economy that we're facing, just like we did that 100 years ago, and say, what was the right education system for that economy that we had? And even if it's industrial based, we have technology components. Even if it's retail-based, we have technology components. We have to look at the new economy, right? The networked, global-based, collaborative environment that we live in, knowledge-based economy that we live in, and ask ourselves, what parts of education do we need to continue, and what do we need to add to what we're doing so that we can create a system that prepares our students to thrive, right? That's kind of what we want to make sure we're focused on. So that's number one. Number two is this idea that we want to make sure that we're asking kids the right questions. I cringe anytime someone asks my 13-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? I graduated college, and Google didn't exist when I graduated college, right? So there's a likelihood that the job doesn't exist for our students that are in school today. And two, how does my 13-year-old, who's a well-educated, witty, smart kid, know what a biomedical engineer does, right? Or a sustainable architect, right? Or someone who works in banana plastics to create colors, right? So these are jobs that we have out there that our students don't even know about. So for me, it's not about asking our kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's about asking our kids what problem they want to solve, right? And when you think about what problem you want to solve, first, it's not global problems. It would be great to solve the world's hunger problem, but it could also be making cars go faster, or making better equipment in mining, or better supply chain management in retail, right? It's what problem do you want to solve? What spins in your head, or making blenders quieter, which is a problem that somebody needs to desperately solve. On Saturday mornings when my wife wakes up and makes shakes before she goes, hey, that's my personal problem. But anyway, so what problem do you want to solve changes the conversation from who do you want to go work for, right, to the autonomy, right? What motivates us? What motivates all of us? The human condition that motivates us is the same, right? It's autonomy, it's mastery, it's purpose. So when you go from asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Who do you want to go work for? To autonomy. What problem do you want to solve? Where do you go get those knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to solve that problem? And then if you think about technology as the field that I'm in, right, the world has fundamentally changed, right? When I was a kid in school, I went to this archaic building, big giant building, usually made of marble or things like that. We used to call it a library. And that's where my information center was, right? That's where I had to go get research. So if you asked me in school, hey, what happened on a specific date, or tell me about X, I would say, I don't know, but I'll be back tomorrow and I'll tell you, right? Because we had to go get that information in these libraries. Today, we have 100 million libraries at our fingertips, and we're not taking advantage of that, right? How do we take advantage of that with education in this knowledge-based economy? And then we can ask students, where do you go get those classes? What online classes? What classes can you take? Who should you be following? What blogs should you be reading? What websites? The world is at your fingertips. How do we empower our students to become digital leaders to take advantage of what's out there, but to have that purpose, to have that autonomy, to have that ability to master the skills that they need for the pathways that they choose. And by the way, pathways and jobs and careers are all separate things, right? So the idea that I started at Arizona State University. I went to work for Governor Cuomo. Then I went to Accenture and I worked in consulting for 6 years. And in that space, I worked for Motorola, Seagate Technology, Sun Microsystems, and other companies. And then I went to Charles Schwab. We'll skip that part. And then I've been at Google for 9 years. What pathway was created for me, right? So the idea that the pathway is based on some kind of job or some kind of career doesn't make any sense anymore. It's about your passion, right? My passion is to solve the global education problems that we face, right? How do we use technology to level the playing field? How do we use technology to bring education to billions of people? In India, for example, I know that India is not part of the consortium that's part of this, right? India is not part of this. In India, if they could build all the schools in the world that they want, they would be short 1.4 million teachers, right? That takes a different education model. So for me, when we talk about education, what we need more than anything in education is a culture shift. And the governor mentioned this a little bit, right? It's this idea that what we need in education is a culture of iteration and innovation. That there is no education model that it's a continuous improvement, that we're always fixing education, that it doesn't look like anything in the future, so that our education model today won't look the same in 10 years, and 20 years will look completely different from that. It's this idea that we have to build lifelong learners who collaborate on global problems, and that should be our focus.
But so let me pick up on that, thank you. And so it seems part of your antidote is getting people thinking about the possibilities that they could themselves play a role in addressing whatever challenge it is. That's easy in some sense for us to imagine your kids, even hearing you talk for a second, that your kids would feel empowered to do that. So they say, yeah, I'm going to make that quieter blender. So if we take that as a starting point, which is that the kid doesn't even know, we'll stay with a kid, but it doesn't have to be a kid, an adult doesn't even know that there's the possibility of engaging in that sort of problem solving, how do we do that? So you say, Tracy, well, there's 1,000 unfilled jobs that require a certain set of skills to address those, to come up with answers. How do you communicate to the world that there are opportunities, and to frame it the way Jaime says, not that there's a job with a paycheck, but that there are difficult problems that somebody smart needs to fix? Because it seems to me that's how you draw people in, more than simply putting a want ad up.
It's a great point. And when I mentioned that we're starting to think of this pathways issues in a different way, we're doing exactly that. And one partnership that we've just recently launched in the past year is a partnership called Dig Into Mining with Discovery Education, which is the education arm of the Discovery Channel. And it's a standards-based program that teachers use in the classroom, and they learn science and math concepts while also learning about the mining industry, and in particular, jobs. And what we emphasized through this particular partnership is getting kids and parents to think about what those problems are. So it asks questions like, do you like to problem solve in a systematic way? Do you like to tinker when solving problems? Do you enjoy having specialized knowledge? So getting them to think about not what the end game is, because it is extremely hard for kids to visualize what's a mining engineer or what's a geologist. But if you get them thinking about molybdenum, right? So I agree 100% that that's a shift we need to make, because I think we have been caught in an approach that it causes us to talk to kids about what the specific jobs are and try to get them excited that way, and it's just not working. So that's one shift that we're making in our educational programs. I think where it becomes extremely challenging is, and I agree, the education system is not broken. And when I made a comment in my opening remarks that we haven't solved this problem in the last couple of decades at least, I'm talking about the connectivity between education, higher education, K-12 education, higher education, and the workplace, whatever that might look like for each student. And so there's great things happening in education, also opportunity for improvement. There's good things happening at the higher ed space, and then there's a lot of jobs to be filled. But students and parents aren't getting the information they need. There's a communications gap, at the very least, for how do you get from point A to point B. And who's going to have these conversations with students about what problem do you want to solve? In the absence of guidance counselors or teachers that are able to have that conversation, there's nobody having that conversation. And when you have parents that are not necessarily highly educated themselves and are uncomfortable navigating the educational system with their kids, you don't have anybody having that conversation. And so that's why we believe there's a disconnect between the steps from education to workplace.
Well, the key question there is, what are those disconnects, right? Because if you think about education from a practical perspective, in 1973, 28% of the jobs required some kind of post-secondary education, right? We're pushing 60% in the future. And so when we talk about that post-secondary education, obviously what we're saying is that we need deeper skills in something. And why? Because of technology, because of the evolution of of the complexity of the jobs that we currently have. And so that to me is the disconnect. The disconnect isn't the job. Electrician in 1873 and electrician today are two totally different jobs, right? And so what are the skills that kids need, and how do we get them the skills that they need along that pathway? And that's what we need to focus on, is the fact that that we have a different environment that we live in. So what is the education system to prepare for students for that new world?
But I want to be.
Can I jump
yeah,
in just on one
yeah,
piece?
thanks.
I hear this all the time in rooms just like this, where we're talking about pathways and kids, and I don't think it's what we can do for them so much as what they feel motivated to do for themselves. And so I think, Jonathan, to your original question we're talking about here, I think it's about persistence and motivation and sense of opportunity. So what is the sense of opportunity that you have about where you are right now and where you could be, and how do you get there? So, to use a close to home example from Walmart, we have a store manager in Iowa whose name is Jessica, who's 27 years old. And she started as a part-time associate at Walmart, single mom in her teens. Single mom in her teens. She was not in a position where folks were saying, you are highly likely to succeed and highly likely less than 10 years from now to be earning six figures without having to go back to college. Jessica worked her way up through Walmart stores and now manages one of our stores, which means she makes above $100,000 a year, and she's overseeing an $80 million business. She does not have a college degree. We as a company don't think she needs to have a college degree, and she's doing very well. That's what worked for Jessica, and what motivated her was her daughter. So that story is going to look different for any and every, not just young person, but any person. I think what we institutionally, both as companies, as business leaders, government, and educators, workforce developers, have to do is identify how do you put those tools, those puzzle pieces, in place for people to find. And I think right now, it's like the best kept secret that insert great opportunity here. And so I think there's so much that we collectively can do to deconstruct how the systems work and how many, particularly young people, perceive the systems need to work. And I think the greatest disservice we can do for young people is to tell them you have to have a college degree to be successful. My company, the largest company, the largest private employer in the world, doesn't think that that's what you need. Now, granted, to your point about 60-40, 60% of jobs say you do need that. That's great, but 40% say you don't. So it's not so much either or. It's who are you and what do you need to be successful. And I think transparency of what that is tremendously important, and there's so much that technology can do to help to facilitate that. But I would say that the one thing technology can't do, though it can help facilitate, is be a meaningful relationship for a young person. It can do a lot of things, but that it cannot do. It could be a meaningful relationship for a young person digitally, so you don't necessarily have to be in the same community as that young person. But we're, at the Walmart Foundation, in our initiative to create more economic mobility in the retail sector, we're playing around with, and would love to talk to any of you about models to invest in digital mentoring options, in how do you connect someone who doesn't feel like they have options, who feels like I'm doing this because I have to and I don't know where to go from here, to feeling like this is a stepping stone to where I want to be and I know I can go in 10 different directions from here. Those are two very different statements.
So let me jump in for a second, because I want to pick up on something you said now and before, because I think it's important to differentiate the sort of motivational possibilities depending upon the kinds of jobs you're talking about. So it's one thing to motivate somebody to say you're going to figure out how to get to the moon, or you're going to figure out how to mine minerals that are vital to society. It's another thing to motivate somebody to take a $9 an hour job at Walmart. And I think that it's important to have a realistic conversation about that. I right now have the fun of working with Starbucks. We have a partnership with ASU, and we're engaged in some of the same projects about getting opportunity youth into the employment stream and so on. I think a frank discussion says, and it goes to your point about the why. Why is this? That pathway is not as sexy as saying you're going to end up working at Google. And yes, there's a possibility you'll be a $100K a year store manager, but that's a long road to hoe. And so how do we craft a story and a technique to get people excited about these more prosaic employment opportunities, which do improve people's lives' fortunes, but they're different. I mean, let's be honest about it. I don't think most people in this room would be excited about going to the Walmart stockroom and earning $9 an hour and doing that every day. I just think we have to be honest about that. So how do we build that in? And of course, every company has that. Not everybody at Freeport is a $50,000 a year engineer. I don't know if Google has people who make minimum wage. Maybe one guy somewhere. But it seems to me there has to be a conversation about that. Otherwise, this conversation is fraudulent.
Right. So first of all, in terms of meaningful relationships with technology, my refrigerator's pretty tech heavy, and I have a really meaningful relationship with my refrigerator. So I disagree that. Anyway, I'm kidding. So I didn't say 60% of jobs require a college degree. I said that they require some kind of post-secondary, I graduated from high school thing, right? Because I don't agree that everyone should go to college. I also don't want to tell people who can and who shouldn't go to college. But at the same time, we want to make sure that, so for example, at Google, believe it or not, we don't require a college degree either, right? So if you look at our job applications, it says college or job experience, equivalent job experience, whatever it is. I haven't applied for a job in a long time. But anyway, so that's kind of what it says. So we have, our guy who runs our infrastructure doesn't have a college degree. It's more about the skills and abilities that you bring to the table. So in terms of motivation, working at Walmart isn't, and someone said it on the panel, so forgive me, I don't know who said it, but this idea that working for Walmart isn't the end point, right? It's part of the pathway, right? Just like working at the movie theater for me when I was in high school was part of my pathway. And so that's how we have to look at it, is that in order for you to get to these things, this is the pathway that you can take. And so Walmart becomes part of that conversation, at least from the way I would spin it. He's on, by the way, the battery life.
I just want to add, in sitting here thinking about this and taking the comments into consideration, I think what we need to do is prepare more students, have their starting point on the pathway be a higher paying, higher earning job. So you don't have 200,000 people applying for jobs every year. There's a better distribution of people and students who can apply as a starting point on their path for those higher paying jobs. Because if we fill the higher paying jobs in the Southwest that we have currently, we won't be able to attract those higher paying jobs to the state that we need to grow the economy. Now, that's not to say, Walmart is a critical part of every state's economy. There's no question about that, and they've got to have employees too. But why are there 200,000 people applying for, what are lower paying retail jobs when we could potentially get them to a point where their pathway point could be a higher entry point?
No, I just appreciate that my colleagues in mining and at Google understand the value of jobs at Walmart.
So I want to give you sort of a final 10-second soundbite to say, why should other companies, not the people here, they all care, forget about them. Why should somebody who's not here, who says this is a problem for somebody else, why should they give even a little bit of time to thinking about the answer to the questions being addressed by our attendees?
You want me to start?
Start.
So one is, I think the interesting thing here is that we are all in different spaces and we all have hiring issues and needs, right? That's just standard across the board. It's been like that forever. In the next 5 years, so this is not 2095, this is 5 years, there's going to be 1.5 million computer science jobs available in this country, right? And about 600,000 people to fill them, right? So we're talking about computer science as a study. Now, computer science doesn't mean guys in lab coats working on big computer problems. It's everything from technicians to all the way up. So entry-level jobs all the way up. In the United States in 2013, 1 million kids took AP history. for all those history jobs? No, and not that history isn't important, but it is important. But comparably, right, 40,000 took AP computer science in this country, right? So think about those two numbers. Not that one is more important than the other, because I think we do need history. But 40,000, and out of that 40,000, 4,000 were Black and Latino kids that took computer science in this country. So if you think about the demographics, right, the 1 in 4 kids in public education is Latino, and that number is going to continue to grow. And companies like Google and others need people who are studying computer science, and yet they are not studying computer science. What do you think what's going to happen in that scenario, right? Either we're going to close our doors, or we're going to go start hiring in other countries. And our offices in places like India and Belgium and other places will start growing, and our offices here in the United States will remain the same. I mean, that's the reality of what we're facing. And so how do we prepare our kids to be able to do that? And so part of it is creating opportunities. So I'm working with Kent Scribner and the Phoenix Union School District, and we're creating the Phoenix Code Academy, right, which is a inquiry-based high school where kids are going to come in, and we're targeting, hopefully the kids that come are low-income Latino kids from the feeder schools who are interested in computer science. And we're going to teach them how to code, so coding becomes a language that they learn through high school. I mean, those are the types of things that we can start doing that have real impact right away, right? As these kids graduate with computer science degrees in high school, you're going to see the number literally tick every time one kid gets one of those diplomas. And hopefully what we're doing is creating the Kobe Bryants of computer science, right? Which is they don't need to go to college, right? They already have the skill set to do what they need to do. So it's those types of things that we need to focus on is, do we have the right pathways in front of us, those opportunities, those options for our students to be able to jump on?
I would just add, I think for our company and many other companies, what's not working is young people not showing up for work. And what's not working is young people feeling indifferent about the work that they're doing and a lack of a sense of purpose or drive to complete that task, whether that task is stocking shelves at Walmart or coding for Google, that task is bringing a sense of fulfillment to who they are as an individual. What's working is the young people who come to us motivated for whatever reason they are motivated to leverage that entry job opportunity to whatever comes next. So I think the more companies can ask of their associates and their employees, what comes next for you and how can I help you get there? And it's okay if you're not here forever, but the fact that you came here needs to mean something. I think that's, I know for Walmart, a tremendous point of pride that we are investing heavily in trying to create is that coming to Walmart for 12 to 18 months means something and sets you up for success. That doesn't necessarily have to look like or mean a career in retail, but it does have to mean a stronger sense of purpose and a stronger sense of value in the work that you go on to do. So I think, Doug said it very well, which is that as a country, we do not necessarily honor the hard work that occurs, for example, in all of our stores. I have done it, and I would challenge any of you to do it. Spend 2 or 3 shifts in a Walmart store. That is hard work. If you can do that, you can do just about anything. You just may not have the educational access and opportunity to open the right doors to get into various jobs. But you certainly have the motivation, you certainly have the drive. So I think if we can just unlock that potential as a company, we will benefit by the productivity and commitment of our employees. And I think that's the same for just about any company.
So I'll be fast. I think if you're sitting in the room as a business today, whether you're small, medium, or large-sized, I would be willing to bet that if we don't solve this issue, you will have a hiring problem if you don't have one now. You will not be able to fill jobs. And I think that all of us sitting in this room, if the only opportunity for students was lower paying jobs, we're doing all of our students a disservice. We have to prepare them for all types of jobs. It's not a ladder. It's a set of monkey bars. There's a lot of different pathways. And we can't leave out the minority populations, Native Americans, the Hispanic population in the Southwest, the women and girls. We have to tap into those populations if we hope to have the kind of prepared workforce that we're going to need to fill jobs tomorrow and jobs 20 years from now.